So the labor market is a very special place. About 2/3 of the entire country's income, no matter what country you're in, is traded in the labor market. And this is the formal labor market where firms are actually registered with the government, etc. It's not different in the informal economy. As a result, the labor market is important to understand, and we need not just one model, we may need several models to think about it. One of these reasons is that we know that people work primarily because they have to. Okay? Most people have to work to earn income, to feed their families, to enjoy life, to buy consumption goods. That's the fundamental aspect of a market economy that we can't ignore. And as a result, the most natural way of thinking about the labor market is supply and demand. There's a supply of labor coming from households, and there's a demand for labor coming from firms and the government. And the outcome is that economic activity takes place, value added occurs because labor is essential for producing that value added. It's essential for producing GDP. So the first model you want to look at the labor market with is actually the supply and demand model, the model in which there's a supply of labor and there's a demand for labor. And it's inevitable that you come to the conclusion that if we've reached an equilibrium that we understand from other contexts like the market for apples or industrial steel, that there's going to be an equilibrium of supply and demand. And if you take that view, that means that the labor that is supplied to the market is actually voluntarily supplied and no more. If we observe unemployment, it must be, according to the supply and the demand framework, is because people are not willing to work more at the going wage. And that's very discouraging for a lot of people who are unemployed. So again, it's a first cut at understanding this phenomenon. The second cut at understanding would be to say, well, maybe the wage is not equilibrating supply and demand, and maybe the market isn't clearing, and therefore unemployment that we observe is not voluntary, but it's involuntary. So that would be a second cut, a second model for understanding the labor market. And under those conditions, it's quite easy to understand that maybe the wage is a tad too high to employ all the people who are willing to supply their labor at that wage. Now, in fact, there are a lot of wages, and in fact, there are a lot of labor markets, so we're always speaking in abstract terms. The model is necessarily a reduction of complexity. And this yet still may not be enough, because in a market like in a world where you have many advanced industrial economies where labor is traded in a fairly regulated way, the observance of the observation that we have simultaneous unemployed people and vacancies, possibly in the same city, possibly in the same district of a city, makes one wonder if the supply and demand framework is worth anything at all. So that gives rise to a third model that we look at in labor economics and macroeconomics, which is the model of flows in the labor market. Sometimes it's called the search and matching paradigm. And in this paradigm, think of the labor market as like a bathtub. And the bathtub has a level of water in the bathtub, and that level of water is the stock of unemployed people, the number of unemployed people at any point in time. So it's a stock. And augmenting that stock at every instant is an inflow of individuals who have quit their jobs, lost their jobs, have for some reason entered the unemployment pool. And then there's simultaneously people who leave the unemployment pool and find jobs. And these are very interesting processes. These are very relevant economic mechanisms for us. If we restrict our attention just to the two labor market states of inside and outside the labor market, then we're basically looking at people who have lost their jobs because they've quit or they've been fired or their companies have closed. And we're looking at people who find jobs because they've left unemployment. They're left unemployment because they've found something. And under those conditions, we can speak of neither voluntary nor involuntary unemployment. It's kind of a mix, because people in the state of unemployment are not particularly happy, but they may actually turn down some work in the hope of getting something better. And that's a more complicated subject, which is kind of beyond the realm of this course, but it's very important and useful to think about.